Hey, howdy, and welcome all to the Big and Bright Podcast. My name is Nick. This here next to me is James.
Howdy.
Not a lot of newsworthy stuff, I guess, happening. So our script doesn't really have like a bunch of super big topics today or this week, I guess, because just not a ton going on in Texas.
Except for March 1st, but that's down the road.
We're going to talk about that. We're going to discuss that, right? But this day is going to be a little bit of a different episode. We got the fire going in the back. I don't know if you know, but this fire in our studio is a working fireplace. And we're just going to riff about some stuff that's been going on. We're going to talk a little less casual, or a little more casual, rather, a little less formal, about some of these things that are happening in the nation and how that applies to Texas and just things that are going on in Texas, really.
Because Texas matters the most.
Yeah, and again, we do have March 1st, which we will talk about.
Good.
We have primaries coming up.
Oh, wait, I'm sorry. It's March 1st for people who align with my side. If you're not, then it's March 2nd for your primary vote.
Oh, shut up.
It's primary. I can say that one. It's not really going to miss
It's a primary.
anything.
No, well, the primary is important.
It is important.
We're going to talk about
However,
why.
the other side already knows who their primary voter is.
The point is there's just... Texas is always in the news in some way, I feel like.
To make fun of us, usually.
Well, because it's an influential state, right? And the things that we do...
Damn straight.
Yeah, the things that we do actually carry some weight, right? When was the last time you heard someone talk about Maine, right? Unless it's to mock the fact that nobody lives in Maine
That's
except
fair.
for a bunch of old people. The point here is that Texas has a lot of weight on the national stage. I think that's become particularly applicable with the recent news about the Biden vaccine mandate.
Oh, yeah.
Now, I know this is a national topic, right? I get it. It's a national topic. For those of you that don't know, the Supreme Court struck down the Biden vaccine mandate. They stayed it. So what does that mean? What does it say? Does that mean they said no? Does that mean they said hold on?
Okay.
They stayed it.
It's a fancy way. It's basically... Okay, so a lot of people want to have usually the Supreme Court like weigh in on something like, hey, is this constitutional? And their usual response is file a case. Mm-hmm. Because Supreme Court does not give judicial opinions about things that may or may not be constitutional unless a case actually makes it up there. Because they're not there to give advisory opinions. They're there to rule on cases at hand. So what they said is this one went through the whole rigmarole, got to them, they agreed with the Fifth Circuit's stay, saying, yeah, you can't put this through. There's no reason to actually put this through. So basically, this is the only way you can get an advisory opinion. And it says, hey, we're not saying you can't absolutely do it. What we are saying is we're likely going to freaking overturn this if you send this back to us. So I would advise you, don't waste your time. We're going to stay it, and we're going to say no.
All right.
But the weird thing is, it only went halfway.
But the private mandate is, for all intents and purposes, dead in the water, right?
Yes. In layman's terms, yes.
Okay. Well, you said it only went halfway. Is that because of the Medicaid and the healthcare workers situation?
Yeah. Thanks,
So,
Kavanaugh.
And this is crazy. And the funny thing is, we're saying thanks, Kavanaugh, because
You're a rapist, as you claim, Mr. and Mrs. Left. That guy voted for you.
That guy voted for you in the case of if you're offering Medicaid benefits that can be attached to a vaccine, and healthcare workers need to be attached to a vaccine, which I am royally peeved about because I have people in my family that work in healthcare. And
that's the risk you take when you take something to the Supreme Court.
Yeah, and they are now mandated. They're now mandated to have this shot, which is
they still allow exemptions, religious and medical. However,
that's true.
Does your hospital actively accept them? That's a whole other story.
That's very true. Here's the real situation that's going on with this. That I think about this. I don't know. It's not a dissent. What is it when they say yes, we're going to stay, but right? The qualifier, I guess. Right?
For what?
So they said we're going to, I guess I'll just call it a qualifier for now, and you can correct me at some point, right? But they had this, the private mandate is no, but the qualifier is Medicaid benefits are attached to the vaccine, and healthcare workers have to get the vaccine. So here's the thing about that qualifier, is that we said, thanks, Kavanaugh, and Kavanaugh's not the only justice that was appointed by a right-wing president that was involved in that decision, but we just assume that Roberts is going to vote with the left.
Because he's always liberal.
We're just
when it really counts, he's a lib.
We're just now
he's
regarding
not conservative
Roberts
at all.
as a liberal justice. We're not even including him in it. Right, we're just saying thanks Kavanaugh because you were the one hope.
Bush only put him through because he was the path of least resistance. Ugh.
Yeah, Roberts is a rather frustrating Chief Justice,
Yes,
to say the least. But Kavanaugh definitely was frustrating. I'm really upset.
And the
with
qualifier, what you're mentioning as qualifier, is basically what it's allowed to for a lot of things when it comes to the federal government. If the federal government gets funding, they're allowed to have strings attached. Mm-hmm. That's part of it. So, let's take the easiest example that people might know of: highway federal funding. If you don't know, back in the day, it was the ripe old age of 18. You could drink. Then it became 21. A lot of states didn't want to say 21. So the federal government said, due to safety, you will not get highway funding unless you make it 21. Mm-hmm. Some states, Louisiana being one of them, if you've ever been there, you can see the roads. They waited the longest. And they said, all right, screw it, we'll go 21. Then once all states did it, they just said, all right, sweeping mandate is 21. It's really hard to undo now. And you only get federal funding for highways if you keep it at 21.
Yeah.
So the federal government is allowed to put strings attached to their funding because they're the ones giving you the funding.
So you know the solution here. End Medicaid.
Yeah. Well. See, we kind of quibbled back and forth about that, and what I said was to kind of do what they did earlier with Obamacare. Some doctors went on their own and had their own clinics, and their own clinics offered their form of like health care, which is like a little package form just for a certain few. Well, they said we reject Obamacare. We don't have to accept it because we have our own form of health care, which is very localized and nothing can be bought across state lines, so it's all here. So I'm thinking a lot of doctors can like sift off, make their own clinics that don't accept Medicare and Medicaid, mm-hmm. and they can continue this whole process. How easy is that? Oh, not at all. So that's why it's like, well, it's a great idea. However, that's not great.
That sort of goes into what Texas can do about this, right? Well, now that this is done, the next question is, okay, what should Texas do to ensure that this doesn't happen again? To ensure that we're not putting an undue burden on our citizens about this vaccine? How can we help? And I think part of it has to do with that, what you just mentioned.
Yeah.
Another part of it has to do with the concurrence. You impressed that I know that word, right? I actually read the opinion. I read the dissent, which the dissent is pretty much what you think about it, right?
Yeah. Lefties, yeah.
Yeah, the government should have the right to do whatever it wants because this is an emergency. Okay, whatever.
Yeah, with Kagan saying 100,000 children are in hospitals.
That wasn't Kagan, that was Sotomayor.
Yeah, okay, sorry. Yeah. Either way, completely fabricated, and Washington Post going, yeah, it's four Pinocchios. And then I'm watching leftist pundits who were talking about it because I was on Twitter going, here we go, let's see how they spin this, because they have to. It's their woman. They have to spin this. Well, she may not have been exactly correct, but it reaches a truer meaning. No, it doesn't. The truer meaning is you lied completely.
Yeah. It does reach a truer meaning. That truer meaning is that Sotomayor doesn't know what she's talking about.
Right, 100,000 was her claim. It was just over 3,000. That's a big difference. Imagine Trump saying 450 and it was 425. I can, because a lot of stuff he did, he was off by maybe 100, a few. Well, this lie right here, and the lie number 3,000, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
Because he simply got a few numbers off. That was a tangent. I apologize.
That's a good tangent, and one of the reasons why that's a good tangent is because we're on Twitter, right? That's one thing that you should have pulled out of that. We're on Twitter. You should follow us.
Yeah.
By the way, you should also like and subscribe to this podcast. A little late for that plug at this point, but you should.
Biggest thing is share it. Yeah. We really need a lot more views to get traction and comment. That way it helps us actually get more traction because then other people can see it. And I don't care if you disagree with us or agree with us. I don't care if you hate like us. I don't care.
Yeah.
Share it with your friends that think differently than us. I'm using their sites, so it's really hard to say I'm a right-wing trope when I'm using your own sites for our own arguments.
Share, comment, like, subscribe, and bell. We're supposed to hit the bell.
Oh.
I don't know what that means. Anyway, helps with the algorithm. But I want to get into the concurrence, right? Because the concurrence makes a really good point, which is the reason that this is a problem in the first place is because the legislature isn't doing their job.
No.
Now, there's a lot of legalese in the concurrence, and I'm pretty sure that that's what it said. Am I wrong? Yeah, that's what it said. It said the legislature's not doing its job. They're not making this into the law, so we're having to implement things like OSHA and these executive agencies to carry out these policies because the legislature's not doing their job.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, what's funny is that the court also cites one of the head officers of the Biden administration, the they administration, that said, yeah, we can't do it this way, so we're going around the process. And it's like, you tweeted it and said it right there. Yeah. So we're not sorry.
Can't get it done in the Senate,
yeah,
so we're going to use
You just
OSHA.
said it yourself, so I'm not going to play this game. It's like, no, you already admitted. So don't play it now like, well, come on, we've done this in the process or we've done this in the past. No, we haven't. Mm-hmm. Especially no one's admitted it. You keep that quiet part quiet, but you said it out loud because you thought no one could stop you. Welcome to reality.
So here's what I think, right? Because the big question is, this is a Texas podcast. Obviously, the vaccine mandate is a national issue. It influences.
But it also influences Texas.
But what can Texas do? How can Texas utilize? How can we grab onto this situation and really influence, really help make change happen? Here's what I think. I think the Texas legislature should do its job and they should force the issue. What I mean is the Texas legislature should come out and outright say, we're going to ban vaccine mandates for, we're going to ban private companies from implementing vaccine mandates on their employees, right? Specifically when it comes to health, right? Specifically when it comes to matters of health, or something of the like, right? Make some sort of legislative effort. What that does is it forces the federal government to implement law.
The executive has already done it, Nick.
So
we have an EO number 40. EO 40.
I don't care. I don't want an EO. I don't want an EO.
No.
I want a legislative action.
The only solution is having a 4-day fourth session. And I know I am not a proponent of having multiple sessions. This is the time to actually do it. This is the one where my usual argument of blah, 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 don't do government influence. This one is wrong. Because it needs to have a 4-day session, which a lot of legislators and a lot of senators in our state have said to do, to say that EO that Greg Abbott has passed, which he has done, that says no matter what entity you are, you cannot force this on someone, yet here we are, because plenty of Texas companies are doing it despite the EO, so you need to make it a state law, or Abbott, start demanding just compliance. You have a Texas Attorney General. Your job is to say, hey, this county, this business, they're not doing it. Go, take them to court. That's all you have to do. And Ken Paxton will be happy to take them to court. He had an amazing track record with Obama, is having an amazing track record with suing Biden. He will still kill these businesses as saying, hey, I don't care how you do your business, but this part of it, we can't have some influence here, and you're not going to do it. But yet, here we are, an EO that exists, and hardly anybody's following it.
I'm telling you, we need to get some legislative action going.
Well, so then have Abbott call a fourth session.
Call a fourth session.
But he's busy right now trying for primary re-election.
Well, that's another thing that we're going to discuss in a second. But here's why I think that's an important situation. Because when you do that, you're forcing the issue. You're now saying, okay, what's the federal government going to do? Right? We have a state law.
Nothing.
Are you going to impose? And they'll say, well, we'll impose OSHA. We'll impose, EPA, FDA, one of the alphabets.
All
right?
the faceless organizations.
They'll come in and say, we're going to have a policy. This state legislation, it violates your policy. And then you activate Ken Paxton. Then you sue the administration. And then you now have a Supreme Court case that is specifically about this issue of what the executive agencies have the power to do and not do.
Well, by the time you initiate the federal side of what you're saying, you're already too late. When you're in Supreme Court, you're at the Hail Mary stage. You've lost the play of doing a simple ground and pound. If you want to take it sports kind of theory, you've lost the game.
Well, okay, then an appeals court, right?
But when you get to the courts if the Fed is already doing it, and you get to the courts, you're already running from behind. Now you're playing defense instead of playing offense. What Texas should have done, and Abbott tried to do with this EO, is say, we're not going to do this no matter what you do, because he had the EO, and then the whole OSHA rule. Because Biden admitted that there was some OSHA rule they were thinking of. It took 2 months because it was emergency, but took 2 months to write it, so very emergency. Mm-hmm. But in that time, Abbott said, well, here's our EO. I don't care what businesses you are, private, public, you're not doing this in the state of Texas. Yet, here we are, and we're still having to fight it. Why? Because you're not doing enough.
Abbott, the EO's not good enough. I want a law. And again,
I want a Texas law as well.
This is partially on Abbott he's got to call a session, but then this is partially on the legislatures doing their job. I want a piece of legislation in the state of Texas.
Legislators can only advocate for another session. The governor himself or herself has to actually call it.
Yeah.
So that's all they can do, and a lot of them have. They're all over Twitter. They're all over their own sites saying we need a they have it as a hashtag 4-day fourth session because it's just 4 days because they literally like we just want to pass this one law, which I'm fine with. You want to have another? I don't like sessions, multiple sessions, but I do like one that's specifically just for a small thing. And we're adjourned again. We're done.
This is where states that are not just Texas, but states that are in line with Texas's ideals have an opportunity to push back, right? We have the federal government on their heels. Now let's make them call them to task.
Start doing offense. I'm so tired of defense. It hasn't worked. Look at all the culture. Conservatives, you lost. We've been losing. Start playing offense. They're gonna call you a racist, bigot, homophobe, no matter what you do. So you might as well just go with it and say, you know what? Fine. Here's another same trope. I'll play bingo. Oh, look at that. You said this, said that. Oh, got bingo. Good job. The exact same tropes you've been saying for years. I don't care. Start playing offense.
All right.
It's annoying.
So speaking of offense, there are a couple of people right now in the Texas primary who are playing offense.
Yeah, buddy.
Let's talk about. You want to talk about March? Let's talk about March.
All right.
March is coming up.
First.
March. Yes, I know it's March 1st, right?
They might not know.
We said March 1st at the beginning of the episode. If they've watched this far, they've heard March 1st.
Well, to be fair, everybody skips your intros. I don't like you.
Okay, March 1st. Why did I let you on this podcast?
Because you had to.
March 1st is the primary. And Abbott looks like he might be in trouble. Now, because this is a primary, I'm less concerned, right? Because I feel like the Texas Republicans are going to back whoever comes out of the primary, right? I really, really hope, and this is what concerns me here. There's a couple of candidates on here that I really feel like might run as a third party if they don't win the primary, and I really don't want that to happen because then you're opening the door for Beto, right? If you do that, right? Then you're running the risk of splitting the conservative ticket and losing to the Democrats in an increasingly purple state. I mean, let's be honest, okay? Let's just be honest about where we are. Texas is no longer a blood red state, right? We have that reputation still, and I think that can help us, but that's not necessarily.
I don't think we've been as blood red as they want to assume we are.
That's true.
We've gone over this. It wasn't until the 90s until we had all three houses.
And in that situation, we don't want to split a Republican ticket, right?
No.
We don't want to run that. So if we're going to have this fight, let's keep it in the primary.
Who do you think's going to split?
Huffines.
Huffines?
I think
Huffines. Don Huffines has it?
I think Huffines will run.
By the way, we made that a guess. He is definitely not attached to Huffines has it at all. He's a whole different guy.
Totally
just the
different
same
dude.
name.
Totally different dude.
Almost as cool as another candidate for the Republican ticket for governor, Rick Lynn Perry. He is not the Rick Perry of our former governor.
Yeah.
Which when he came out, I sent it to a family member of mine who is on the other side. And she was like, oh, Lord, is this Rick Perry? I was like, no, read it. She was like, oh, okay. I was like, come on.
And it's not Rick Lynn, it's Ricky Lynn.
Yeah, he made sure to differentiate.
I don't think he actually goes by Ricky. I think he's just doing that to be like, I'm not this guy.
I'm not Rick Perry, the one you know.
The point is, we've got a lot of Bushes and Clintons and Kennedys in the state of Texas. We have a lot of really
George
common
P.
names.
Bush,
a lot of really common names in politics. But Greg Abbott is in trouble at this point, right? According to the Paradigm Partners poll, which published last Tuesday, shows that he's just at 32.5%, right? He's at 32.5% support among likely Republican voters. Now, that's a big deal. An incumbent president is at less than a third of the voters, right? And he is behind another candidate. Now, which candidate do you think that might be?
Well, I know who the candidate is. It's Alan West.
It's Alan West.
The Florida native.
Which is shocking to me. I would have thought, especially because if you drive around our area, you see all kinds of Don Huffines.
Oh, Huffines
He's
everywhere.
all over the place, right? He's really pushing.
He's blowing that money.
And he's pushing the narrative that you would think Texans would respond to, which is that
some Texans.
Is that Greg Abbott is not doing enough in the conservative wing, right?
Well, Alan West is doing the same on his Twitter. He just is much better, I think, at messaging.
Yeah,
because he's he's been in the limelight for a while. He also used to be the head chair of the GOP for Texas, and he resigned that position in order to run. He is very, very good at getting the media out there and picking up on small phrases that necessarily don't have to be out there and put bumper stickers or billboards, but without those, he's still one of the top. He's very, very good at what he does.
I'll tell you this: I'll vote for Alan West before I vote for Don Huffines.
Well,
I will. Right? It might be.
Well, I've discussed this with a person too. It's like Huffines says a lot of brandish things, and I mean, I kind of like what he says, but
I think Huffines is trying to pull the Trump angle.
Yeah, and I was talking to my wife about it, and it was like, it's easy to say when you're not elected, but it's a lot harder to do that when you're actually elected. So, for instance, I'm going to stop. His biggest thing is I'm going to say, screw Biden, I'm going to put a border wall, whatever. Well, it's fun to say that when you're not in the office, but when you're actually in office and there's like, hey, there's some rules, just that, it's maybe not as simple as you did. And that's what Trump kind of found out whenever he got in this. I want to do this, this, and this. It's like, well, there's procedures that we can't just undo just because you want to. And they're there to protect you and to protect other side from doing the exact same thing. And so it's like, oh, crap. Well, if they were doing it, I guess it makes sense. I'm still kind of peeved because I want to do it my way. Well, you can't have it all the ways because you're not always going to be in power. So that's why they're in place for a reason.
See, this is what concerns me. I think that you've got guys like Alan West and Don Huffines that are going to get elected based on this rhetoric. Then they're going to get in office, and they're going to become
can't do any of this.
They're going to become the next Greg Abbott because right now we've got so many people.
And they're going to blame something else.
Abbott's
like, it's not
doing
us.
enough. Abbott's whatever. I think they're going to get into office. They're going to realize the realities of that office, and then they're going to get a lot of flack for not doing enough because there's just
here's the funniest thing. The funniest thing they're probably going to say, it's the dang legislator, it's the dang Senate. It's like, dude, they're both red. Who you blaming?
Yeah,
it's kind of like Democrats who have other states like, well, if the radicals wouldn't be in that, it's like you have, like, for instance, California has called their legislator at one point radicals because they didn't do certain laws, and I won't go into it because it's California, so who cares? But it's like, dude, you have a super majority of Democrats. Who are you talking about? The two Republicans you have there that have been ostracized anyways? Yeah. Like, don't give me this crap. And that's exactly what I think certain things will happen if the other guys get inside. And if they can't do exactly what they want, they're like, well, the dang legislature. Well, dude, it's red. It's been red since at least the 1990s. You ain't doing it.
We have a situation here where we might lose on the ticket the Republican incumbent. Do you think that represents any damage to the Republican side of politics in Texas?
I disagree with taking polls outright, because I looked at the article you sent me about it from Newsweek, and I mean, Newsweek is fairly accurate about when it actually reports on polls. But even the poll they had was just over 1,400 people. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you've seen Texas population. We're about 32 to 34 million, depending on how many illegals you count. But
so you think
1,400 to me is, I mean, it's a great filler for news.
You think Abbott's fine? I
don't know if Abbott's fine. I just think that because they do these because they try to get a general population and general kind of like just like snapshot of an average. Because if they do that average, well, it tells out the rest of Texas. Well, this is how it's probably going to end up. And I don't know if you've seen 2016, 2020 polls get it wrong a lot. So to me, it's a great fodder to talk about. However, I don't know if it translates into actually being a vote differential. I am with you on being frustrated with Abbott on certain aspects, but that doesn't necessarily mean I want Alan West either.
There is a fracture, though.
There is.
I always find, so like,
because he's not doing a lot. He says a lot on Twitter, and then he doesn't pass anything or call a session to do certain things.
I always find fractured bases to be frightening, especially when you're talking about your side of the aisle, right? Because all politics is base mobilization. There's this myth in elections, and I studied parties, campaigns, and elections was my emphasis, right, when I got my bachelor's. And there's a myth in elections that there's the Republicans and the Democrats, and that you're campaigning for this sort of weird middle ground, and the person that gets the most undecided voters, right? It's called the myth.
An independent,
yeah.
Really?
It's called the myth of the undecided, right? And there's this concept that we're fighting for these undecided independents. That's not true. Literally, elections is about base mobilization, and that's it. It's not about who can swing more people from one side to the other. It's about who can get the most of their voters out, right? Who can motivate those people?
Yeah.
And I feel like if you have a fractured base, because fractured bases often become lethargic when it becomes primary time, or not primary time, when it comes general election time.
Yeah.
Right? If you're a fractured base and your guy didn't win, you were really gunning for Don Huffines, but Greg Abbott won the primary, well, I'm not going to go vote for that guy, right?
Right.
Or same thing with Alan West or whatever. So bases that are fractured in the primary often become lethargic in the general, and you don't want that to happen, especially in a state that's looking the way Texas is looking. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. It's still, I just don't take this poll as an absolute. However, I mean, it's great fodder to talk about. Will Alan West be the primary candidate that wins? I don't know. But I think it's weird that Don Huffines is so low, despite his name being all out there. Maybe he is just a blowhard that no one really likes. He has a lot of money to spread around. I don't know.
You also got to ask where those 1,400 came from.
Yeah.
If they were inner city people, then of course they're not going to vote.
Right, but it did say Republican voters, so at least they did say it was Republican. So, like, we'll try to go to your side and say, hey, your side, what do you think? It's still like, yeah, where are those 1,400 people from? Was it 2 from West Texas? 500 from South Texas? What was it? But
and it's not even really a geographic thing. It's just about who's in the populated areas, because the idea.
I mean, I'm sorry.
No, the idea of the Texan is this sort of guy that lives on a farm and is running around on his horse and all this. And those people exist, right? Most of them are out west, right? Those people do exist. But in the populated areas, there's some nuts in the populated areas of Texas. Like this is, what was that woman? That woman that locked her kid in the trunk?
Oh, my gosh. How have we not talked about that yet?
This woman locks her
in
child
Harris
in the
County.
trunk of a car.
This is in Harris County. Woman pulls up to a testing site for Rona. Then tells the person there, yeah, my kid's in the trunk because he has COVID and I don't want to get it, so I don't want him infecting me. All right, 2 questions.
You're a psycho.
Why didn't he stay home? If you're that worried, just let him stay home.
Yeah.
2, why did this kid voluntarily get in the trunk? Or how did he let his mom force him to get in the trunk? Like, I was not the most obedient kid, like we all weren't at certain ages.
And this isn't a 10-year-old, it's a 13-year-old.
I wouldn't have been cool as like, get in the trunk. This is what I'm saying. No.
Yeah.
I'm going to give you a whooping. I don't care. I'm not getting in a trunk. I've seen way too many movies. Nothing good happens when I get stuffed in a trunk.
So, to me, at 13 years old, I'd have been cool with getting in the trunk, to be honest with you.
No.
Because I'd have been like, that's cool. I don't have to wear a seatbelt. Why not?
Then she was let off $1,500 bond. That's it. That was it. $1,500 for stuffing a kid in the trunk because you got Rona.
Not just stuffing a kid, stuffing your kid.
Your own kid.
Your own child.
And the funniest thing was CNN put a thing out because the judge, for some reason, there in Harris County, again, Harris County, wonder what color they are.
Harris County.
Oh, is it blue? Oh, it's a shocker.
Oh, Harris and Travis.
But he says no probable cause, which means there's no reason to. There was no. What's a good layman term for it? There was no identifying reasons to actually search it. Like, you just kind of did it. Well, she told the person there what she did, so there's your probable cause.
Yeah, probable cause is I
then,
said my kid's in the trunk.
And then 2, CNN's headline about it is talking about the woman being released and being dropped, and it said, for a woman who allegedly put her own kid in the trunk. There's no alleged. There's a freaking video, and she admitted to it to the person.
Kid's in the trunk.
It's alleged. That's not a word,
Wow.
but it's totally alleged. No, I'm sorry. This woman's crazy, and she has support from the community. What the heck's going on? What's wrong with y'all? Y'all are crazy.
And this idea, well, that's an outlier. So yeah, stuffing your kid in the trunk.
She's a teacher
Let's be
as
honest.
well.
Stuffing your
Sorry.
kid in the trunk. That's an outlier.
Yeah.
Right? That not everyone is stuffing their kids in
But
the
you're
trunk.
nuts.
But this, I think, is endemic of a psychosis that has just struck people, especially people in inner cities, right? Of this concept, because and I don't like using this term, but the media is pushing panic porn on. That's basically what it is, right? It's this idea of we're going to get clicks and we're going to get hits.
That's what
because we're going
Dr.
to
Malone said on Joe Rogan's podcast that has been heavily censored on the internet.
Yeah, go to Spotify. It's still all available
All
on
of
Spotify. But there's this concept of like we need to be pushing this panic partially because the media needs people to click on their stuff, right? Just like we ask you to subscribe and like and comment.
Everybody's got a mortgage.
One way that we could do that is by just saying, we're all gonna die constantly. And that's basically what the media is doing. The other thing is the media, who is in a lot of cases very much in league with the government, let's just be honest about that, is pushing this because the government needs to have an excuse to impose things like, I don't know, vaccine mandates.
Yeah.
If you believe that you're going to die from Omicron, which let me be very clear about something, you're not. You're not going to die from Omicron. You're going to be okay. And your kids are going to be okay. That sort of thing is breeding this psychosis where people are saying, did you see this on the news? Yes, I did. And then there's this sort of echo chamber that happens within your circles.
Everybody just quotes each other. They don't actually go out and investigate anything.
And that's amplified.
And that's the weirdest thing.
That's amplified by social media, right? What?
We pissed off the Alexa. Apparently.
We're here talking about social media conspiracies and the.
They're like, Alexa, this is actually true fact.
The Alexa in the studio is like, well, hey, COVID-19 could kill you. Yeah. No, it can't.
We should have probably disconnected that.
Well, here's our situation. We've gotten to the place where yes, this person who's putting her kid in a trunk is an outlier. But there's something that's happening in our culture that's breeding this sort of behavior.
She's a teacher. I told my wife this. Who works in education? And she goes, wait, teacher? Yeah, teacher. And then I showed her that she has support in the community. She goes, what's wrong with this community? I have no clue. I have no flipping clue. Also, sorry, side note, so I'm going to interrupt you because I just remembered it.
You're rocking and rolling, go for it.
The vax mandate from that Biden just got knocked, or the Supreme Court just knocked down for Biden. The vax mandate itself, from OSHA, not the legislator, because we can't do anything with an actual vote. That way you don't have any consequence. They actually recommended, and only recommended, 2 shots. Pfizer's own CEO said, well, 2 shots probably isn't enough. You probably have to have the booster, and that's actually should be the full regimen. So even the one they wanted to force down your throats wasn't even enough for what Pfizer claims is actually better to help you keep immune. Also, just kind of weird, weren't Big Pharma people supposed to be bad like 3 years ago? Now all of a sudden we praise them like they're a Jesus or something?
Big Pharma is an easy target to either elevate
like maybe an incentive.
Or put down, yeah. And here's the thing about educators. I don't know what it is. Every person that I know, every single educator that I know, maybe with the exception of some of the people that are associated with you,
yeah.
But every person that I know, once they've gotten involved in education, their political leanings have gone more left. Even the most right-wing people ever, as soon as they become educators, start to get a little bit more left-leaning.
Because it deals with the public, that's why.
Because it deals with the public. I also think that teachers' unions play a big part in this.
We don't have those in Texas.
We don't have them in Texas, but we do have them in other states, and those teachers' unions influence the culture around educators more broadly. Okay?
And they also advocate because how they get more funding.
That's true.
From the government. So they advocate kind of a bigger government style without even really thinking it from that aspect. They just want more money, and I totally get it because, like, my job's hard. I would like a pay raise. The only way you get it from the government. So you're kind of having to advocate for a little bigger government. This
idea of, this person's a teacher, why would they say such a crazy thing? I have sort of an opposite opinion of, this person's a teacher. That's
sense.
why they said this crazy
sense,
thing,
man.
right? So it just happens.
Actually, I work in education. Okay, I'm about to hear a left-wing thing come out of your mouth, ain't it? Yep, there it is. There we go.
And that's the situation. This is actually an interesting thing because we're talking about voting in Texas. There's a big controversy about it's now becoming harder to use mail-in voting in Texas. I had a friend of mine that was talking, and I was theoretically talking about this idea of reducing the ability for people to vote. And I said, I think only property voters, or only property owners should vote, which isn't necessarily what I believe, but I was just kind of tossing it out there.
Right.
I do believe it should be more difficult to vote, but I said, what about just property owners? And this guy, right, who was a teacher, said,
I think I know this guy you're talking about. He goes,
yeah, property owners and public servants. And I go, no, because there's a lot of public servants that I know that are just leeches, and not all of them, obviously. And
you kind of saw that in D.C. Most of D.C., like when last election happened, D.C., if you live in D.C., more than not, you're working for the federal government in some form or fashion. Yeah. So a lot of times they go more blue than anything else. Why? Because they give you more money.
Yeah.
And throw it at you.
And I'm not just here to say that I only think people that think like me should vote. But
I am.
I know plenty of people who are public servants that don't really have a stake in the game other than what they can draw from the federal government. And he was upset because this guy rents, right? And so and that's another reason why I think, maybe property owners, I'm still kind of leaning towards that, but there are plenty of really good people who happen to rent.
I rent, and I'm actually for that. It's like, you know what? Take my vote away. That's fine. Because you know what it'll encourage every state to do? Let's make the housing market affordable again. Yeah, let's start building. Let's start doing this. Oh, look at that. You forced the hand of the government's like, all right, maybe we should take a lot of these restrictions off so people can actually just build it without having to worry about all this because the safety really didn't go up much higher when we put all these restrictions in. Let's just take them back out. Yeah.
You want to know what
you need to have people in houses again. Stop making a rental population. This is terrible.
You want to know one of the best ways to increase the the average household wealth of your state? Make home ownership more accessible. Incentivize home ownership.
Exactly.
Or not just home ownership, but property ownership. So
right.
If you have a business but you happen to rent, right? That sort of thing.
It's not as simple as like, well, they should lower the prices. Well, you can't just artificially lower prices because that's not how it works. People still have to make a check.
But here's the situation.
It's just weird.
So
sorry.
The situation with voting. The reason why I mention this is because there's this big push against some of the legislation that has been passed recently in Texas about mail-in voting.
Talk about the Tribune article?
Yes! Because let's be very clear about something. Mail-in voting got ridiculously out of control in 2020.
It was a controversy.
Ridiculously out of control.
And the headline says, hundreds. We'll go back to, how many million does Texas have? Yeah. Hundreds? Oh no. Hundreds.
Texas Republicans last year enacted a new identification requirements for voting by mail as a part of sweeping legislation that further restricted the state's voting process and narrowed local control of elections.
Reminder, this was the original reason why Democrats headed for the Hill.
Yep. You need to show identification or submit some sort of identification indicating that you are this person that mailed the vote in, which, by the way, is one of the ways to get past this huge problem with mail-in voting. I would be totally fine with mailing your vote in as long as you could send some form of identification with it.
Yeah.
Right. And they're saying, well, that's So again, it says Harris County.
Oh, I'm shocked.
Harris County, 280 applications, which is roughly 16%. Of the 1,276 applications received so far. So they're saying, well, 16% of voters. Yeah, in Harris County, which is where most of the crazies live in Texas. Let's be real, right?
There's one.
If you're talking about, if you put a gun to my head and said, Nick, where do most of the mail-in applicants from Texas come from? I would say Harris County, 100%. I'm going to say Harris County. So you're seeing a lot of people.
How heavy blue is the county? Well, then it's there.
And they're saying, well,
wasn't Travis on that list?
Travis is also on the list, right?
Austin.
They said half of the roughly 700 applicants came from Travis County. So Travis County and Harris County are where they're pulling this from.
Yeah.
First and foremost, that's a problem.
Who have an incentive to down the Republican side?
Second of all, they're saying hundreds of applicants. Okay.
Hundreds.
I'm sorry if you can't get an ID and your vote is not counted for some reason, or if God forbid you have to show up at an election site on election day.
I have to stay in line for 2 hours. Yeah. Is it not that important to stay in line for 2 hours? I thought you said democracy was important.
If you can't do that,
good golly,
and your vote doesn't get counted, Texas, I don't feel bad. Yeah. I'm sorry, I don't feel bad.
Texas automatically allows 65 and older to pretty much get on the list if you wanted to get it. Then if you're not 65 and older, you got to do an application for it. A lot of them are accepted because Texas is way too lenient on it because we're trying to pretend. They're trying to go with, well, they're going to call me racist. Not. They're going to call you racist no matter what, but fine. Anyways, mail-ins, no. Like, it was a COVID remedy. We're past COVID. If you haven't got the vax, that's on you.
Yep. If
you've already got the vax, move on. You can't stay in your bubble. This is not going to happen. And we're going to reference again, Dr. Malone. Again, someone who works and helped create the mRNA technology. He's on Joe Rogan's show. Again, heavily censored because it goes against the narrative. Despite the guy actually had a hand in creating the technology that created the vaccines. And he's saying, yeah, everybody's going to get Omicron. Even Fauci, yeah, everybody's going to get Omicron. You got to move on. It's not going to kill you. It's not going to be that bad.
You can't live your life that way. And I'm sorry, if there is a certain civic duty that comes with voting. We like to think about voting as a right. First of all, voting is not a right; it's a privilege.
Yeah.
And second of all, privileges come with duties. If you should vote. Let me be clear. If you have the right to vote, right? If you have the ability, if you are eligible to vote, you should do it. It's part of your civic duty. It's part of your patriotic duty to do that. And if that means you have to get out of bed and go to a polling place as opposed to mailing in your vote, then you should. Or if that means that you have to figure out a way to acquire some sort of identification, which, let's be clear, everybody has ID. Yeah, I am so sick of this idea that
I hate that
we're saying, oh, well, some people don't have ID.
Who?
Name them. Show me a person that doesn't have suitable ID for this situation.
Well, that's legal to vote, but can't. No, you are legal to vote because you have an ID. You know how I know you have an ID? Do you have a job? You ever bought liquor, beer, tobacco, anything? Have you ever gotten medication?
Do you have a vaccine?
Yeah.
Did you get the vaccine? Right.
You got an ID somehow, didn't you?
Seriously.
Like the thing is, like, have you ever gotten any form of medication? You know what they do? Let me see your ID, sir.
ID. Yeah.
Yeah. You know why? Because people like to lie and then use it for other drugs and make other things with it. Have you ever been on food stamps or any kind of helpful assistance from the government? And I get it. That's not something you want to brag about because a lot of people, they're in their worst state and they're like, you know what? I have to take it. I don't want to, but here we are. That's okay if you're using it for the right reasons. But you have to have an identification in order to make sure they know the check is going to you.
Yeah.
Did you get a stimulus this past year? Which of all the people on the left like, we need more stimulus. No, you don't. But did you get one? You know how you got one? Because you don't have an ID. That's how they know you exist. Good night. This is such crap.
Everybody's got an ID.
It's just, you found two people that told you, and that two person that keeps being quoted and repeated and quoted, and that's you said, echo, echo, echo. Now it's a truth. No, it's not. It's not a truth. No matter how, fetch is not going to become a thing. You cannot make fetch a thing.
Everyone's got ID, and the fact is, if your vote is being rejected, if your mail-in vote is being rejected, it's not because of lack ID. It's probably because you're trying to send in 2 votes or something like that. Right?
Or you're just lazy. Oh, well, I don't want to stay in line for 2 hours. Well, I guess democracy doesn't matter that much because that was your usual cry to help. And it's like, well, if you're not going to do what's required of you, then too bad.
But this all comes from the media. The media panic, right? The fear that they're trying to spread, right? Because people say, oh, I can't go to a polling place because I might get the rona. Show up in a hazmat suit, I don't care.
Yeah.
But you got to go to the polling place. But it all comes from
just put a grocery bag over your head and tie it. That way, make sure nothing gets in or out.
Right. Speaking of that, Tribune and also some of these local Houston places are talking about, oh, Texas has the highest Rona cases in history. First of all, yeah, they do, right? They're saying 75, so pandemic record in one day we had 75,000 new cases. 75,000 in a state of millions of people, right?
Oh, I'm gonna do one thing. Let me pull a Biden here. What are the deaths?
they're actually quite low, right? If you look at some of these WFAA articles, the hospitalizations and death rates have actually continued to go down. Now, you've got to dig deep in this article to find that number, but they're not very high, right?
You know what that article also didn't reference?
What's that?
What's the reduction in hospital staff since last year? Because they were heroes until they didn't take the vax. They're not heroes.
Significant.
9.5%.
Also, another
that would
stat,
maybe have a like we talked about in a previous episode. You know how many beds are allotted per hospital? It's how many they can actually have staffed. That you can just have a bed that no one goes to. You have to say like, well, this person per person, you get so many per bed to keep it safe, and you can stretch a little bit depending on the situation. But typically, what was it? It's 3 to 5 beds you can do as a safe measure because you're having to go through 3 people because that's only one person to go through 3 people. So it's a lot to put on him or her doing this.
And by the way, if you're on a ventilator, that's one nurse assigned to your bed, and they cannot be assigned to anyone else.
Because they want to make sure that if anything happens, you're there, you're ready to take it. Well, if you reduce the staff, the beds also get reduced. So you're going to keep firing people because now the Supreme Court has allowed it because you didn't take the vax. Well, then your beds are going to feel a lot easier no matter what it is. And also, same article, checked it, read it 3 times, also didn't specify, well, how long they staying in there. Oh, I had to find it on even New York Times because they had to admit it in the bottom of their article. They said it reduced for about 3 days of hospital stay. So about 70% of hospital stay, according to a study out of California, which has the biggest kind of like I don't know what the actual name of the California, but it's kind of like Baylor Health here. That it's not just one; there's a few, so it's kind of like a chain.
Yeah.
Or it's I don't want to call it a chain, but that's the easiest way to think about it. You know,
Hospital
it's like
groups or what
groups,
they're called.
yeah. And according to that group, their study, it's reduced by over 3 days. So you're staying in about 1.6 days per time if you're actually hospitalized for this.
If you're hospitalized at all,
right? Because most of them aren't. So it's going the right direction. Yet we still go.
Another stat that the article conveniently leaves out is what is the rate of vaccination? The rate of vaccination availability has gone up. The rate of vaccinations in general has gone up, right?
We also have a pill, by the way.
More and more people are now getting vaccinated, and yet we're still getting 75,000 people in a day, right, that are being infected. And we're still hearing, and you talk about things that you're sick of, we're still hearing, this is a pandemic of the unvaccinated. No, it is not.
No.
It is not the responsibility. So it's not the unvaccinated people that are getting the vaccinated people sick. Vaccinated people are getting Omicron. You are going to get Omicron. I don't care if you've been triple, quadruple vaccinated. It's going to you are going to be infected at some point.
Period.
Might not be as severe if you're vaccinated, and there's some data that might suggest that's the case. But you're going to get it.
Right. I mean, even the pharmaceutical companies who, again, we used to hate, now we're super duper love, and they're almost godlike. They're even saying we're in the process now of getting an Omicron variant vaccination. So why are you insisting me getting vaccinated now? Well, to reduce your death. So I'm still going to get it. Yeah. Well, how deadly is it if I don't get vaxxed? Not that deadly. Well, then shut up. Just shut up. I looked it up today. Texas has 57% of our population fully vaxxed. I think it actually went down. I think they changed fully vaxxed to having at least 3, but I didn't really care. I don't really care about that. It's just I was just curious about what the raw number may be. Mm-hmm. California 67, 75% is for New York. Take a wild guess where all the deaths are. California, New York. How about that? Yet they're super duper woke about it.
Yep.
Well,
and by the way, last I checked, 67 and 75% vaccination rate should be more than enough to get that herd immunity.
Yeah.
But the Omicron variant, which is airborne and is way more easily transmissible, is essentially ignoring the vaccine. Right?
It's like going, sorry, fam, I'm going in anyways.
So cases are going up. Cases are going up despite vaccination. Cases are going up despite the fact that deaths and hospitalizations are going down. So I don't care about the 75,000 people who have a cold in the state of Texas. I just don't.
Yeah, and I'm not a doctor. I'm not going to pretend I'm a doctor. I know I just can read facts. But if you really want to hear a thorough explanation, if you happen to have 2.5 hours or spread it out, watch the Joe Rogan episode with Dr. Malone.
It's actually closer to 3.5 hours.
But it's interesting because a guy who is trained in virology and repurposing of drugs goes through, and he even says, I can't speak to the intent of why they would do this. I just know this is what happened. They downplayed hydroxychloroquine. They downplayed ivermectin, despite the overwhelming facts of being really great at being repurposed one way or the other. And you have countries like China using some of those kind of things, and that's the reason they could actually not have to get as deadly before we actually had a vax. Yeah. It's really, really weird how the government's kind of done all this little play to really force you to take the vax instead of having all these other all these other medicines to help you out, since if you can't get it, don't want to get it, whatever. Here's another way to do it. Oh, you can't afford this? Well, here's a generic version. That's basically what it was. And it's really weird. I mean, I would encourage you to watch it. It does have some explicit language in it, but it's really, really good.
The situation here is that Rona is over, and Texas should be pushing that. Right? Texas should be enforcing this idea that, yes, there is Rona it exists. It's endemic. It's going to be around forever. We're never getting rid of it. But the pandemic part of this, the part of this where you are in severe danger, that's ended. That ended a long time ago.
Yeah.
And we as a culture, right, going back to that lady that put her kid in the trunk, we as a culture should actively shame these people. If you're putting your kid in a trunk, shame on you. You're an idiot, right? If you are keeping your kid out of school, or you think it's a good idea for your kid to wear an N95 every single day they go to school, shame on you. You're an idiot. And you should be considered a child abuser, in my personal opinion.
And there's studies that back that up that say it's terrible for kids, yet those studies were definitely squashed, buried, because we can't have any of that, because that could lead toward not getting the vaccine. No. And it's hurting children.
I know that that's forceful language, but we've got to get ourselves out of this psychosis.
Offense.
Yeah, we've got to get out of this psychosis that just seems to have swept over communities in our country, and that needs to start here in Texas, right? We need to do that, and when we do that, when we start getting other people like Florida and some of these other states that are in line with our ideological leanings to say, listen, we're done with this is over, maybe there it spreads to the rest of the nation, because
be a freedom state.
Yeah, we are again, we talk about that light in the darkness concept, right? We are the state that people will mirror and people will follow. Some people might do so kicking and screaming, but they're going to do it. We are the stars at night. We are big and bright. And I'll see you next week, guys.